Step back, Jay. Harden. Bullseye.
Sixers looking very focused in the second half. Maxey looking for more. He's got it.
Daniel House, little up and under on the lob, and then flies in with the emphatic one-hand jam.
Niang looking for more from outside. Bang, bang, George Niang.
Joel, the process heavy.
Welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of the Pick Swap podcast. We are in the heat of July here. Summer's moving pretty quick. Middle of July, it's me and Sean Barnard as usual. Sean, how you doing, man?
Doing well. All is good in the world. Bball Paul remains a member of the Sixers organization. I feel like this is a win for Sixers Twitter, so I'm excited to get into all that. Other than that, can't complain. It's kind of the dog days of the sports world. Things have winded down pretty much just about everywhere. MLB All-Star Game coming up midpoint of the season there. But yeah, not too much happening right now, so good to catch everyone to catch their breath a little bit.
Yeah, slowing down here. Summer League wrapped up, question mark?
No, there's still a little bit more. Sixers play tomorrow, and I think they have 2 more games. Tomorrow and Friday, they definitely play, actually. So, yeah, there's still things going. Terkavian Smith is, like, the man, so that's been fun. You guys can check out some of the post games that I've been doing with the guys over at Edge of Philly Sports, Mr. Crockpock and Tiago. So there's been some awesome stuff there. I've been excited watching it, so I have enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, Summer League has been a lot of fun, a lot of different things going on. It is the peak of overreaction time in the NBA, so a lot of different opinions and things flying around right now, but it has been cool to see the Sixers maybe stumble upon a good player here in Turk Smith. So that's been fun to kind of go along here. We're going to talk about a lot of different things today. Obviously, a big one being Bball Paul coming back, so we can kind of start there. Interesting way that played out. I feel like there was a lot of jockeying on both sides between Danny Ainge and Daryl Morey. I feel like this could have been a lot more linear experience for everyone involved, but it seems like both of those guys like to make things more difficult than they need to be. So just kind of recap the whole situation for me between Paul signing the qualifying offer and then the Sixers ended up matching it about 90 minutes before the deadline.
Yeah, so that was kind of this happens a lot in the NBA when it's a player negotiating in good faith and that the expectation is that he will come back to them, that both sides want that to get done. That there generally is, we'll let you go set your market, we'll see what's out there, and then we'll match it. And that's what we're going to do. That was essentially what the deal was between Sixers and Bball Paul. I think in the order of operations that he kind of just fell on the back burner of like, we got you, we'll figure it out. Both sides wanted this to stay together. And then the Utah Jazz swoop in, who made him an offer sheet, which Paul Reed did sign, and the Sixers were up to match. And a lot of intricacies from Danny Ainge to tie that in. The second round clause saying that only the first year of the contract is fully guaranteed unless the team makes it out of the second round. Cool little clause and smart move by Danny Ainge to do that, because obviously the Sixers have a much more likely chance of making it to the second round than the Utah Jazz. So it would have been not a great contract for Paul if the Sixers had not matched it, to be honest, if he had not gotten guaranteed money with that. A couple other little intricate things there and really pushing the Sixers to match that luxury tax line, to be willing to step into that apron. I didn't think it was going to happen. That was my mindset. I did not think the Sixers were going to match. I thought there was a real world where Paul Reed was going to walk away, and we see the Sixers run victory laps all over their social medias that they did bring him back. Did you think that he was going to come back? Did you think they were going to match? Do you think it was the end of the Bball Paul era?
I thought initially, I thought for sure that they would match. Digging into it a little bit, they're looking like it was with the salary cap and its adjustments over the next couple of years, it coming down to really Paul being like under 6% of their cap over the next couple of years. When I kind of got to that point, I was like, there's no way they don't match. But as the minutes and the hours went on, I got nervous, and I actually was asleep. I had went to bed, had a bit of a long weekend, ended up going to bed pretty early on Sunday. And when I laid my head down, I was like, he's not going to sign, or they're not going to match. So I was disappointed going to bed. I woke up pretty happy seeing the news that he was back. I think I don't think the Jazz really had any intention of him playing there. Like, it feels like there was no real way that they wanted that to happen. They were just going to really play chicken with the Sixers. And they use a Daryl Morey tactic against him, the poison pill contract, as they call it. So that was a cool little wrinkle. It's fun to kind of dig into some basketball history there and see the intricacies, as you had mentioned. But using a contract negotiation tactic that Daryl Morey used to get Omer Ashik out of Chicago is an absolute bomb, and really interesting way to end up here. But I'm really happy they did. He belongs here. And I have a question for you now is, Paul Reed is the backup 4, right? Like he's not playing center anymore, is he?
It might be the starting 4, James.
Okay. All right, chill out.
So, yeah, I don't actually think he'll be starting from day one. This is how I feel about, well, first off, pulling out the archives from 11 years ago and Daryl Morey's bag of tricks for the Omer Ashik deal was awesome. I do kind of respect it from Danny Ainge. I also kind of respect Daryl Morey. The offer sheet was signed by the Sixers as far as matching it for Bball Paul Saturday morning, and they just did not make it public or release to the press until the deadline Sunday night, which I was kind of like, I was ready to throw a hissy fit on Twitter about them not matching this and them dragging it out and them taking the coward's way out of just letting the time pass by. But that wasn't it. It was Morey trying to do his mind games and I guess get back at him. I'm also surprised there's not more teams that push teams like that when they know that there's a restricted free agent that they want to keep. Go send an offer. Like I thought somebody was definitely going to do it to the Lakers with Austin Reeves this year. Just send in a massive restricted offer and see if they actually meant all those leaks about they'll match any restricted offer, things like that. But yeah, I agree. I don't think the Jazz really intended on bringing in Paul. I think this was more of a forcing the Sixers to spend money, and well, it worked for everybody, I guess. And I still don't think it's a bad deal. I think it's a fair market deal. And with that contract, and this is honestly encouraging to me, is expectation comes with that Paul Reed is no longer this fun-loving random guy who came out of nowhere. He now has a role on this team. He has expectations on this team, and he's a guy that I truly believe Nick Nurse is going to further unlock. I think there's more to be uncovered from him. I think Doc Rivers was so scared to let his weirdness out of the box and was so focused on like making sure he did the basic basketball skills, which don't get me wrong, that was a necessary part of his development. There had to be stuff cut out of there. Absolutely. Doc was right about that. But I think it's time to kind of cut loose and see what this guy truly can do. I'm ready to see a lot more lineup versatility. I think Mo Bamba is another point that he came in. He talked about wanting to play with Joel Embiid and even sharing the court with him, that they both spoke on that. I think there's going to be a lot more creativity with all of that. And when we look at the defenders on this team, like Tobias is probably our best perimeter defender. Like I think there's going to be matchups where Paul Reed gets a legitimate chance against other teams' number ones. And I think there's certain matchups where that will absolutely work. We've seen a success against Giannis, things like that. So I'm very excited he's back, and I think he's going to be a more versatile tool than he's been used as in the past.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about the possibilities with him because it seems like there's still, the tip of the iceberg. We've only seen so little of him. And even in times when he got the nod in the playoffs 2 years ago, and then even again this past season, he proved to be really, really effective in even a limited role. So expanding that a bit, letting him kind of just like be himself on the court and not have to fit a cookie cutter version of the backup center that Doc wanted him to be. So it's exciting. I think people were really losing their minds on Twitter just in general. It was a Mayday situation, totally hitting the panic button from Sixers fans, which I feel like it would have just been like the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, not to throw too many cliches out there right now, but it would have just been like such a bad way to continue this like pretty underwhelming offseason, to put it that way. So I'm happy he's back. It is funny to know that they matched the offer like very early, and Daryl Morey was just like dicking around. It is kind of frustrating to see that like he cares more about a meme and like making a quick joke out of all of this, but it's who he is. So at least he's staying true to himself.
For sure. And I think to me that's kind of the biggest thing. I've obviously been a Team Bball Paul guy from day one since they drafted him and have been rooting for him. But I think you're right that it being like the straw that would break the camel's back in terms of, you look around this offseason, that would have been 0 for 4 of the Sixers free agents that walked. Shake Milton walked to Minnesota, Georges Niang walked to Cleveland, and Jalen McDaniels walked to Toronto. And so to see all 4 of those guys walk away would not have been a good sign. And this would just been another example of like intriguing young pieces just walking out the door, and we don't got to rip open that bag or that wound again of the Isaiah Joes, the Charles Bassies, blah blah blah, on and on. Like I didn't want Paul Reed to head down that line, and one of the things that me and you have talked about on here is just like really making sure that there is this pathway to development of bringing guys in, letting them be these unknown young guys, giving them a two-way deal, growing them into bottom of the rotation pieces, and just seeing what they can turn into. That's been absent from the Sixers for so long. And Paul Reed, to me, is a guy that is very much on that trajectory, who's a clear-cut example of a guy who is the way you want to develop guys. And I just wanted that to continue. So I think it's good for all parties that he's around. I think Bball Paul wants to be here in Philly, which is cool. He's obviously one of the biggest fan favorites there is. And if he didn't know that by now, he absolutely did after this little situation. So it all is all good vibes all around. And I am just happy that we get to keep watching that guy play basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a guy that, it keeps people around. It's good to see him stay and get his money too. Like he did get paid. He got a reasonable contract for, himself, and good on him for that. I will say, people have kind of I feel again, a lot of this is piled up over the last couple of weeks, just with the way things have played out, and we'll get into the Harden situation a little bit later, but I don't want to say I don't care that Shake Milton walked. I really don't care that George Niang walked. I liked George a lot. I liked Shake a lot, but they had significant flaws. Shake,
McDaniels is the only one that upset me, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I do wish that they had done more to bring McDaniels back. It seems like it was not out of their reach to bring him back. It seems like it was an attainable contract. They could have done it. That's a disappointing one, but I've seen so much talking about Shake Milton and the tweets and videos of him going to the Timberwolves. Dude, good for him.
For sure.
These are casualties that happen during this stretch. He was on a miniature tiny contract for the last 4 years. He was going to get paid, and we knew this. So I don't need to worry too much about him or George. McDaniels walking sucked, but it's good to know that they prioritized Paul in all of this. And ended up working out. But how much did we get to talk about Bamba and Pat Bev last week? A good bit, right?
Yeah, a little bit. We talked about the Pat Bev one, not Mo Bamba, I believe. So
we got Mo Bamba right when we started.
We got
right as we
You're right.
Started recording. So we didn't go too much into that, but what did you just kind of Pat Bev has now been introduced, Mo Bamba has now been introduced. They've kind of talked about what they expect or how they got here, just kind of run through their intros and everything.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest things that stood out to me on the Mo Bamba side was definitely him talking about playing with Embiid. Those two have a relationship that they work out together. Both true handling guys, have known each other. And like I said, there aren't too many guys across the NBA that Joel seems to be that friendly with. So I like it when they bring in those types of guys that he is at least to some extent boys with. I want to see some lineup versatility. There's more pieces, and I get maybe it's a waste of that how many big men they have. I've seen that as a concern. The Montrezl Harrell signing just makes zero sense. That's the one that's the kicker for me of why is this guy here? I'm very cool with Bamba being here. I'm very happy Paul Reed is here. Joel Embiid's obviously the star of this team. I don't get the Montrez thing, but whatever. It is what it is. I think the situation there was it was essentially a 2-year deal that they handed him last year. He had the player option. There was a little back end work here where he opted out of the player option and signed for the veterans minimum this year. That was more money in Harrell's pocket and counted less against the cap. So it did work for both sides that way. But I think it was just kind of one of those. There's no world where he wasn't back. As far as Pat Bev, the biggest thing that stood out to me there was obviously the clear pleas for James Harden to come back. And there's been a lot of talk. It's been we saw the Joel Embiid get asked by I think it was Rachel Nichols on the red carpet about his thoughts. Said him and James will be boys forever. I hope the business side of things takes care of himself, that he changes his mind. So there's definitely a little bit of a resurgence of wanting James Harden back, and I think both Pat Bev and Joel Embiid are leading the charge with that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if you want to get into that. I guess we can kind of talk about that a bit. I do love Pat Bev. I am very excited for him.
Me as well.
He belongs here, so it's good to see from him. Mo Bamba mentioned a couple of different things, and I'm excited to see how he plays as well. I think from what it seems like now is Reed is a 4. It's really what all this kind of plays out to. Harrell is just depth at center, he's your third center, and Reed is just going to be your backup 4. Is what I is where I see that going. There's no need to have 4. And then Nick Nurse mentioned on Maxi's podcast that Philip Petrusev could potentially make the roster, and
which sucks. He sucks. I hate to be that guy. I hate to be the Mr. Dream Ruiner, but he's just not an NBA player. And I keep trying to like squint and look at it through different lenses, but there's just not a defining NBA skill in his entire game. He's not a good enough shooter, can't defend, he's not a good enough shot blocker, can't move his feet. There's just nothing that he's good enough at to be an NBA player, unfortunately.
Well, we'll see one way or another. I don't, if it's really going to depend on what Nurse sees, I guess, in training camp. At this point, but like I said, there's no room for 5 centers on an NBA roster. That makes no sense. That's a third of your roster being made out, especially considering your starting center is one of the best at that position. So
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see that the way that plays out. There's a lot of concern over the lack of wings. So we'll get into that, but let's kind of circle back here to talk about Harden. So there was a report pretty earlier this afternoon, basically saying there's a lot of traction about Harden coming back. And it seems like the signals are pointing to him being back in a Sixers uniform next season. About an hour after that report, who was it? Ramona Shelburne reported that Harden reiterated that he would like to be traded still. It's not a demand, but it is a request. So just kind of I don't need this, like the semantics over this shit. Like if he wants to be traded, just let us know. I don't need to hear all of this garbage. So like, what are you taking away from the contradictory reports today?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm already sick of all this, and I know it's going to go on for many more months. Like, this isn't going anyway anytime soon. And I can sum up the situation very clearly. It's James Harden's offended that the Sixers did not offer him a long-term, high-paying contract. The Sixers were in the right mind to not do that because it's a risk. It's a huge risk at this point. And while he was good last year, he was not, we have to give this guy a long-term deal good. He was fine. He played his role very well. There were flashes where he looked terrific and was perfect. And there was a ton of other examples where he just was a guy that you can't have on a team that wants to win. So it's a difficult spot to be in. Now, where they're at here, I hate it's a request, not a demand. It's like, well, obviously, dude, you're under contract here. That's the situation. And we talked a little bit about it with Dame Lillard stuff too, how crazy like the pendulum has swung on that kind of thing. The situation, I do believe the Sixers are genuinely trying to trade Harden, that I think Daryl Morey will do right with him if it aligns with the franchise. But priority number one is doing what's best for the Sixers. And frankly, there was no market for you in free agency. Teams also aren't going to be like going out of their way to give up things in addition to get you. Like you had a chance to just sign. If a team wanted him that bad, they would have signed him in free agency. And I get like there are teams that couldn't, and that's why he opted in. That's why he wants to go to the Clippers, who didn't have the contract. If the Clippers aren't even willing to include Terrence Mann or Norman Powell in a deal, it's like, do you think there's a world where Daryl Morey does that? And we know Daryl more than anyone is a guy who won't lose a trade. And Daryl also probably values James Harden more than anyone in the entire NBA. So personally, I don't see a world where there's a trade that happens. I think there has to be kind of a mutual come to the table, look at each other and realize like the best thing for everyone is to just run this back for one more year and figure it out from there. But yeah, I think we're in store for several more months of various media leaks and a ton of drama.
Yep. Which, I mean, would it be a Sixers summer if it wasn't this way? Like,
Never.
It's almost tradition at this point. So we've gone through this a couple of years in a row. I don't know, man. I don't know what to make of this anymore. I don't know who to believe. It seems like there's been some back and forth. Obviously, Embiid and Harden have a palpable relationship. You've mentioned that multiple times.
Cool.
Which is great. I don't know if it means anything. I don't think I don't think Harden is factoring that, or maybe he is, but not enough. But to hear him come back again here in the middle of July and say, I'm reiterating, I would like to be traded. I don't know where it ends up. Like,
Exactly.
There's not enough. I just don't see a path to the end here. So with him, it's just a matter of time, I guess, if teams get desperate. But this is kind of the point in time where I thought if things were going to happen, it was going to happen now. Like post free agency, post draft, every team is kind of ending up seeing where their horizons are in the future with how their offseason has gone so far. But if nothing's building traction now, I worry that we're going to get into August and September and teams are already digesting where they are for next season. They're not going to blow something up before they even get to play a couple of games. So I don't know, man. I don't know if, like, there's not even, other than the Clippers, like, there's no team at the top of my head that's in a position to take on Harden or trade for him, and there's nobody that I would want back in that instance as well. So it's kind of just like stuck between a rock and a hard place. And his contract does end after the season. Tobias Harris's contract does end after this season. The Sixers are poised to like completely flip their roster after the 23-24 season, and I'm sure Daryl Morey is obviously keeping that in mind, considering everything we've seen from him over the last 2 seasons. So it makes sense for them to say, let's just do this one more time, see what we can do, and then work through things next summer. But it's just a kind of a brutal way to end up here.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And I will say, as far as the trade things, like I think there's bigger tectonic plates kind of swirling across the NBA. The Dame Lillards, the Pascal Siakam, potentially Tyler Hero, all those kind of somewhat connected trades that are potentially going down. I think that there's a world where that stirs things up, where James Harden might become like an afterthought or a secondary target to teams like that. That's best case scenario for Harden. I really just don't see a world where a trade gets done. I just don't see a situation where a team meets the perceived value of Daryl Morey and that he's willing to pull the trigger on it. I think there's going to have to be. And also, like, from James Harden, like, it's clear he doesn't have an issue with his teammates, and everybody's been pretty open about that. He had an issue with Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is fired. So is the issue just the money? Because that can't change anymore. Like, you're opted in for this player option. So you can either like pony up, quit pouting, and go play and then run the same dance next offseason. But like there's no solution to what I guess could offend him at this point. It's that like they can't make an offer now. I guess maybe they could try and extend you or whatever, but like that's obviously not going to happen. So I think there needs to be a reality check for Harden. Let's check in. Let's run it for one more season and see what happens, I guess.
Yeah. There's not too much else, I think, from our standpoint to really even dig into there. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of switch gears here. The Sixers are at what, 13 players now?
Yeah, 13
Does that sound
players.
Right? 13.
And following the Bball Paul signing, all three two-way slots are full. Following the Bball Paul signing, so the Sixers are now $6 million over the tax with 13 players and 3 two-ways. They still have enough flexibility below the second apron to use that tax mid-level. That comes in a little over $5 million. They also can always sign a veterans minimum guy. So these are more of the market. They are digging through the bargain bin, but I do have some names that I want to bounce off you, James. And this is kind of my outlook following the Bball Paul signing is that was the right decision to match that, but that is far from a complete offseason. Pat Bev, I'm fine with. Mo Bamba, I'm fine with. But these are not, the work is not done. So there's a lot of names that I actually was surprised how many guys that are still available that I'm intrigued by. So I'll kick it off with a guy, Philly product, Derek Jones Jr., that me and you have talked about before. 26 years old. This season he played 14 minutes a game, 5 points, 2.4 rebounds, 6'6". Career 30.4% three-point shooter. He has shown some signs of improvement. Last year he shot 33.8% from three. Do you think Derek Jones Jr., any juice?
Yeah, I mean, he brings a much needed aspect of athleticism to this team. We talked about it so often with their slow and old players. They do need a jolt in that sense. So I think Derek Jones Jr. fits that mold a bit. It's disappointing that he's never really found out a way to become a above average or average 3-point shooter, but it's not a bad idea. I don't hate it. I've always like he's another guy that's like almost been a Sixer a handful of times, and bringing him in would not be a bad thing. Bring him close to home, and his role would be probably similar, if not a little bit smaller. So maybe he'd be able to kind of flourish in that sense. But again, it's like all these guys I feel like are kind of going to be this like fine, that's good.
They all got marks against them. They all got some baggage with them for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, he'll throw down a bunch of cool dunks, and that's a plus. So I'm with it.
Yeah, no, I love the athleticism aspect. He's still much more theoretical than in actuality to me. His game as a whole and what he is. Yeah. I'm still not really sure what he is as a basketball player. Like, he's kind of a wing. He's just kind of like an athlete that plays basketball at points. I wish there was some more polish there. And like, I do think he's a guy who's worked on the craft, who has tried to add layers to his game. And I see some signs of polish since when he first came in the NBA, but he still just like lacks some things, some instincts, some decision making, things like that I think really limit his ceiling. But I do think he's a guy worth a flyer on for a veterans minimum that I wouldn't mind. Most of these guys that I'm bringing up are this archetype of it. You can at least kind of squint at and look at as like a true wing type player or an athlete or a box that the Sixers still need to check. That is the first one I want to throw. This guy, I'm very curious your take on Kelly Oubre Jr. So 28 years old.
So I knew that one was coming next.
Yeah, no, this is I've seen this name swirling around a bunch. Coming off the best year of his career, 20.3 points per game last year on a bad Hornets team, 5.2 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 1.4 steals per game, which was also a career high. Shot 43.1% from the field, 31.9% from three, a career 33% three-point shooter. He's 28. What do you think, Kelly?
You said 31.9 from three.
Unfortunately, I did.
Ooh, I thought he was way better than that.
No. And he also has
Oh.
a 25% usage rate and average 1 assist a game, which is almost hard to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not. Yeah, yeah. I'm not super high on Oubre. I like him as a player. He's fine. I don't think that he fits what they're doing. And as a wing, like you said, like not a good decision maker, not particularly good at defense. Like he'll jump passing lanes and like he's the type of guy that'll play like the pretty defense. Like he'll try to get the steals for the fast breaks. He'll try to jump passing lanes, but like when it's time to dig your heels in and guard, I don't really think of Kelly Oubre when I think of that type of player. 31.9% from three is brutal. That's his career, or that was just last year?
His career is 33%. Last year was 31.9%.
Dude, I thought he was way like I don't know what I thought Kelly Oubre was, but I thought it was a lot better than that. That's disappointing to hear. I don't think I'm like super in on Kelly Oubre. Again, if he ends up in a Sixers uniform, like you're not going to hear me complain, but I don't think if I was ranking these guys, like Kelly Oubre wouldn't be super high on my list. I feel like his expectation as a player is also going to be a lot higher than whatever role he would be presented here.
Yeah. So I think like I mean it's kind of crazy to get a 20-point per game score on a potential mid-level exception. So you can look at it like that. There will be like 2 to 3 games this year where Kelly Oubre absolutely catches fire and it's a blast to watch and he wins a regular season game almost because of that. He does have that kind of capability, but I don't think he's a winning player. Makes really bad decisions with the ball, takes some really bad shots, and does not stop when he's cold either. Those are all traits of Kelly Oubre. He's probably like the truest wing out of all these guys I want to mention. The most like I mean, I don't think he's a high level defender by any means. He'll also, get the girlfriends tuning in on the couch next to you a little more than most of these guys. So maybe sell some more tickets that way. But yeah, I'm not gonna be riding for Kelly Oubre, but I do think it's a pretty legitimate possibility, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least some conversations within the Sixers about him.
Yeah, definitely.
Next guy, again, as I mentioned, pretty much all these guys come with some baggage. TJ Warren, 30 years old. He has played 46 total games since 2020. Last year, he split time between Brooklyn and Phoenix, played 16.4 minutes, averaged 7.5 points, 2.9 rebounds, 1.0 assists, shot just 32.8% from three. In his career, he's absolutely has some flashes. We remember him killing us in the bubble. We remember a couple other TJ Warren moments. Overall, he averaged 14.6 points per game, 4.0 rebounds, 1.2 assists, and is a career 35.4% shooter. Is TJ Warren worth a flyer?
Due to my personal vendetta against TJ Warren, the answer for me is no. He also just is never available. Like he's at 46 games since 2020.
Mm-hmm. It's bad.
And in one of those 46 games, he put up 53 points against us. No way. I guess the plus is that him and Jimmy Butler have beef. So that could be a fun little thing to dig into there. But TJ Warren is a shell of himself from what we've seen recently. I've seen people like throw his name out there and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that's where we're at. I don't love that at all. I think he'd be like, what do you even expect from him, really? Even if he is like healthy, like 7 points per game on like below 40% from the field. Like, I don't know. He doesn't bring me too much.
I do think he's probably the second best defender out of these guys that I'm listing. I think he does fit that bill. For me, like I there was a point in time where I thought TJ Warren was a very good basketball player and I really liked him. He's just not around enough. He's just not available enough. The injury concerns are just too significant for me. So this would be almost a waste of a roster spot in my mind. I think it's just be too much of a risk. I'm going to swing to another guy who carries very similar risk, and that is Justice Winslow. A little bit younger, 27 years old. Last year with Portland, played, 27. I was a huge Justice Winslow guy coming out of Duke. He has not quite lived up to what I thought he could be whatsoever. Last year with Portland, played 29 games before he got hurt, 26.8 minutes per game, 6.8 points, 5.0 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 1.0 steal, shot just 31.1% from three. In his career, he's a 31.5% three-point shooter. His numbers, he has played 114 total games since the 2018-19 season, so not much better there. Yeah.
I can't believe he's only 27 years old. That feels like a lifetime ago that he got drafted. Justice Winslow will play defense. Yes. I suppose that's the big thing with him, is that he'll play some defense. I kind of forgot that he was in the league. Like, completely honest with you, I don't know if that's a bad note on my end, but I feel like he has just completely fallen off entirely. It's no disrespect, but it seems, I don't know, man. I maybe on a vet minimum he can do some damage. Like, I'm being like so serious when I say, like, I'd rather have Justin Anderson than him or TJ Warren.
Wow. Okay.
I'd rather have Justin Anderson, but than both of those guys.
Wow. Okay. Well, I would definitely put Winslow above both those guys. I like him as a defender. I think, I really think a true wing defender is a huge missing part of this Sixers team. Not that I feel awesome about Justice Winslow like being the guy, but he's at least like a competent body with an NBA frame and a guy that at a point in time was a very good defender. And I still think we see flashes. The beginning of the year with Portland, dude, I was bought back in. I was like, this is the Justin Winslow redemption tour. And then it lasted like 10 games and he started battling the injury bug again. So I do think that's a real thing they're going to have to fight with. For me, he would be worth a veteran's minimum. I would be interested in at least trying him and kicking him around. Like, he just checks a box that I would want them to have at least an option at. But yeah, there's definitely holes. There's definitely concerns. And he has been nearly the player that I hoped or expected he would be.
Yeah. Out of Duke, man, I thought he was legit.
Me too. Yeah, no, I was all in on him after coming out of the draft, and it just hasn't worked. Two younger guys here. So these guys are not as injury prone or have as much baggage, but still available for a reason. Number one, Anthony Lamb. Played last year with the Warriors. 25 years old. Came out of Vermont. Played 4 years at Vermont. He's at a weird trajectory, too. He's only played 88 career games. Started with the Rockets, then went to the Spurs, and then with the Warriors last year. Had by far his best season last year with the Warriors. Played in 62 games, 19.3 minutes per game, 6.7 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. Shot 36.7% behind the three-point arc on 3.2 attempts per game, so pretty legitimate there. I went back and looked at his college shooting numbers. They're all over the place. As a freshman, he shot 41.3%. Then it went down to 31.8% as a sophomore, then back up to 36.5% as a junior, and then all the way down to 29.3% as a senior. So I really don't know what to expect from him as a shooter. I do like that he does like a lot of things. I think he's a pretty high IQ basketball player. He can rebound. He can handle the ball. He can run an offense a little bit. So I am interested in Anthony Lamb, but definitely a little bit more of a mystery than a lot of these guys.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. Like, if the Sixers are thinking like, hey, we can pick a guy with a little bit more upside, Anthony Lamb might be that type of player. He's played in some good systems, like you said, the Spurs and the Warriors as well, and played alongside guys that know how to play basketball, so filled in those roles at times. So has a little bit more of an upside as a shooter. I think he'd be out of these guys, maybe up there towards the top, just because of. And the thing with teams that are in the Sixers situation is you have to find guys that resurge or like revive their careers or start to in your system. So maybe Anthony Lamb is one of those guys that finds a little bit of a niche, plays a little bit more of like can handle like a secondary ball handler, tertiary ball handler kind of position, catch and shoot threes, and kind of just like connect the dots in the second unit. And he seems like one of the guys that kind of does a little bit of everything, rather than like hoping that Justice Winslow can play a little bit of defense or hoping that TJ Warren can score the basketball a little bit. You're kind of getting a little bit more of everything with Lamb. So didn't consider him too much prior to this, but he might be a guy that I would like.
Yeah, no, I am interested in Anthony Lamb. I think that's absolutely worth a phone call. I also, for me, I want them to find some sort. It doesn't have to be a true point guard, but a guy that can at least step in and run an offense, which I think Anthony Lamb is capable of, just because of the uncertainty of the James Harden stuff. I think it's most likely that he's back in a Sixers uniform, as we touched on. But like, just to have a little bit of security there, I think that's an important note. So I would keep that in mind. I will slide to my last guy here. I think the Sixers are going to be priced out of him, but the market seems very weird, and that's Ayo Dosunmu. out of the Chicago Bulls. He's a restricted free agent, so the Bulls have the right to match. I think it's very unlikely that the Sixers can find a way to get him, but they don't seem that high on him in Chicago for whatever reason. Last year with the Bulls, played in 80 games, averaged 26.2 minutes per game, 8.6 points, 2.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists, shot just 31.2% from three, but he shot 37% from three the season before. I loved him at Illinois. My bad. Loved him at Illinois. Yeah. Wish he broke out the mask again. I absolutely love that. But I've been an IO guy. If there's a world where we can find a way to get him, I would absolutely love it. But I do think it's probably the least likely out of these options.
Yeah. I like Io. I liked him in school. They had a good run in the tournament, if I'm remembering correctly. Good end to the season with him there, but I liked him in the draft. How tall? Do you have an idea of how tall he is? Because he's
6'5".
That's taller than I was expecting, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's kind of, I feel like in my head, I think of him more as like a guard rather than a wing.
He definitely is. He's definitely more of a guard.
So I wonder what their thought process is with these guys. I feel like they're probably going to be angling more towards wings and bigger defenders.
Yeah.
Just because off the bench you have guys like Melton and Pat Bev and Jane Springer. So, you have some options in the guard rotation where not so much in the wing rotation, but so he doesn't necessarily feel like the need I feel like they're trying to go for, but he is, I think, in terms of upside, like I just mentioned, definitely up there with, at the top of the list for upside, and a guy that, like, if you can get him cheap, buy low. If he's not being regarded by the Bulls very highly, it could be a really good play for them. And I mean, he has a lot more in the tank than the rest of the guys that we had mentioned, so I would not be upset by that at all.
Yeah, no, I think he's a good basketball player. I think the Bulls would be wise to give him a significant long-term extension and make him a key part of their franchise, because I do think he's good enough. And as the Bulls are very much in limbo for what their future is, whether they are blowing things up, making a trade, they're another player in this potential, I guess, shifting NBA landscape. But Ayo Dosunmu, to me, is a guy that you want to keep your hands on. So I would be surprised if he shakes loose, but there hasn't really seemed to be much of a market for him. So it's worth at least exploring if they aren't interested or want to let him walk or whatever. But I like Ayo. I do want to spit a couple more names at you. These we don't have to go as in depth in, but a couple other options that jumped out with me. Number one, Austin Rivers. Any thoughts there?
No thanks.
No thanks.
Where was he last season? I don't even know.
Minnesota, I'm pretty sure.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Because they got in the fight, right? They got in the fight with the Magic, Mo Bamba.
Yeah, Mo Bamba.
Yeah, so that was that whole thing.
Pat Bev also almost fought Mo Bamba this year too, so that was cool. And he pulled up behind the locker room after the game to address Mo Bamba, which happy they're both here, I guess.
Yeah, that's just Pat Bev though. You kind of just brush that away as being Pat Bev, but
yeah.
Austin Rivers, like 5 years ago, I would have been like, cool, that's a good backup. But again, a guard rotation, I don't think you need to add Austin Rivers to that.
I do think I prioritize getting another guard more than probably the Sixers do, or probably most people do.
Yeah.
Austin Rivers to me is like, you can play him on or off ball. I like the versatility. He's a good enough shooter that you can survive out there. Smart basketball player. So on a minimum deal, I would be totally fine with him coming in. But yeah, Terrence Ross.
Love Terrence Ross.
Really?
I love Terrence Ross. I mean, like, I love Terrence Ross because I loved him when I was in middle school. So the nostalgia factor of this would play into me appreciating him here. I mean, NBA vet, still has some bounce, can still, again, knows how to play his role, which is like, I guess, a watered down 3-and-D type of guy. I haven't looked at his numbers, or he didn't make anything happen in Phoenix last year that was notable at all. So, probably not too much to appreciate with him these days, but just the factor of having Terrence Ross finally be on the Sixers would be enough for me to take a flyer.
Yeah, he's definitely an almost Sixer plenty of times. I think he's past it.
Probably.
I think even all the washed up guys that I listed ahead of him are at least a little more in the tank. So I did leave him down here in the toss in. Danny Green reunion. Any interest?
I mean, sure, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I liked Danny Green. I liked him a lot, and he ended up being very good for us. And unfortunately, the way his season ended with us and his tenure with us ended pretty badly, just in the injury that he unfortunately had happened to him. But I mean, he was losing it. Yeah. When he was here. So
before the ACL,
and I feel like it was multiple ligaments in that. Yeah. It was a pretty brutal injury. So Yeah, I don't think if you're bringing Danny Green in, it's just for him to be here. It's just for if they bring in Danny Green, it's really just for them to start like stacking podcasters. Like if you bring in Austin Rivers,
I was
Danny
gonna make the same
Green,
joke.
Maxi, like just bring in all the podcasters.
Pat
Unfortunately,
Bev.
George Niang, yeah, Pat Bev. Oh yeah, Pat Bev. Just that like adding the most podcasters on this on a singular team. That's their goal.
Trade for Draymond, get it all done.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna make that same joke. You beat me to the punch.
Sorry, I
there.
beat you to it there.
How about yeah, I don't think Danny Green has anything left in the tank. I do think he's a good enough shooter and a smart enough player to like if you have to play him, like he could survive. And I would if he was a couple years younger, and he was very good while he was here. So shout out Danny Green. But yeah, I don't see too much of it. Will Barton.
Will Barton, whatever. Yeah, I feel like he never really lived up to what I expected him to become when he was earlier in his career. I mean, I guess so. Like, he's another guy I kind of just like, I guess so. If that ends up happening, like, sure,
Whatever.
these are all guys that like have played on NBA teams for a good period of their life, so they know the role and they know, the whole situation. But Will Barton could be fine.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. I left them down here for a reason. Last two
Yeah.
I'll throw out is more of flyers, young guys with potential that I like. Jared Butler and Buddy Boeheim as the two there.
Buddy Boeheim.
Yeah, movement shooter, a guy who cannot defend a lick, but he will absolutely shoot it whenever he gets a touch of it. He can shoot off screens. He can do a lot of things. They are missing some shooting after the loss of George Niang, so I wouldn't mind a flyer on a guy like that. He's also like 6'7", which is at least there's size there, and that helps for getting off a shot and all the other things that come along with that. And then Jared Butler, he's a little smaller. He's like 6'1". I think he's a super high IQ player. I loved him at Baylor, and I think like I really see a high level NBA player in him, and he hasn't grown into it at all yet. I think he deserves a second chance. I would love for the redemption story to be in Philly. The guard room's crowded. I think this is an unlikely one, but I just think he's a good player and hasn't been able to show it yet.
Yeah, maybe like again, both these guys, if you want to go high upside, like maybe they use one of these two open slots to go young and see if they can get a little more out of a guy that maybe has been underutilized in the past, and maybe they go this route. I wouldn't be upset, either way. You give me two young guys, I'll raise you like it's the inevitable Rudy Gay signing that's going to happen in September. So Trevor Ariza, God, that would be miserable. But either way, like I feel like they're probably going to go like one vet, one young guy, and if they do that, I wouldn't be upset by either of those guys.
Yeah. So out of the whole list, is there any that you would pick as your favorite? Personally, I think Anthony Lamb is my favorite name I listed, and I'll go Anthony Lamb and Justice Winslow would be my signings if I was in charge of this.
Yeah, sure. Anthony Lamb, I think, would be up there for me. I feel like he kind of, like I said before, kind of does a little bit more of everything, is a more well-rounded player than a lot of the guys that we had mentioned, and has a little bit of a chance to grow into something more as well. Still just very young. And if he can consistently shoot the three, can check a lot of boxes more so than a lot of the other guys mentioned. So I'll probably go with Lamb there. I'm thinking about it now. Like now I'm locked in on Lamb. Now I'm thinking about where he might end up.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a good signing. But I think that will just about wrap us up. James, you have any final thoughts?
No, I feel like we're probably going to be waiting on this for a little bit. So we'll, just kind of play it by ear from here.
Yeah, the rush of immediate free agents is absolutely over. So now it's the patience. It is these guys fielding different offers, figuring it out. I'm sure the Sixers are talking to a lot of guys. I hope at least Daryl Morey is putting in that type of work. So we will see what happens. But thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe on the channel, drop a couple comments. Let me know what you think of each of these names, or if there's any other guys that we missed that you like. Would love to hear from you guys. But appreciate you as always, and we'll talk next time. Peace.